Well, welcome. This is our first Phoenix Evolve Law event. It's probably definitely in the double digits for Evolve Law. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Jutton, and I have a company called Tracklight, but I also started Evolve Law with Jules Miller from New York, who stupidly couldn't be here because it's much nicer here than it is in New York. So we're going to start off tonight with a panel, and then it's going to be followed up by a Darwin talk. I'm looking for Billy, who's going to do that. And then we're going to go back and eat all that food and drink all of that wine. So Kim Taylor is going to moderate the panel, tonight's panel, and Kim is iPro's president. He's the CEO, but it's very interesting. He was a co-founder and CEO of Lex Solutio for 8 years, and that was acquired by Encore Discovery Solutions. And then he took a hiatus, which is interesting, which I'll ask you about afterwards. And then he rejoined as the COO, and eventually ended up exiting for $100 million to Epic Systems. So that's pretty exciting. Yay, legal tech. So we're excited to hear from Kim and the group up here, so I will turn it over to Kim.
Great. Well, thanks for coming. This is the first time we've had an event like this at our new facility. So we've been here now, this building, for 6 months. And if you haven't had a tour, please go around. And we have an upstairs game room, and my office is normally pretty high on the tour list. I got a crazy desk and stuff like that. But so iPro, we're a software development company, 27 years here in Phoenix, and it's really interesting. Hopefully, this building looks like a tech building, because that's really what we try to do. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So, and we get to drink wine and cheese and all that stuff, so it's good. So what I'm going to do is here's our panel. Why don't you, Josh, introduce yourself, and we'll just go down the road here.
Great. Josh King. I am Chief Legal Counsel at Avo in Seattle, Washington. I have been with Avo for 8+ years. I joined right after the company started, and I've spent the last 20 years next month working in-house in technology companies.
Maria?
I'm Maria Speth. I am with the law firm J. Bergen Wilk. My area of practice is intellectual property. I do mostly trademark litigation, copyright litigation, and internet law cases.
Mark?
Mark Chesley. For the last 10 years, I've been growing Infusionsoft, a local software company. I just left at the end of the year. It was an amazing ride. I was the chief technology officer there, so I'm a geek. I also happen to be an attorney. I joke sometimes that I'm recovering, but so from time to time I'd wear that hat and help the company with all of its venture capital funding efforts over the years, and been really privileged to pull a lot of capital into the state and help small businesses through Infusionsoft. Many of which, thousands of which, are law firms. And a long time ago, Mike Hahn remembers, I worked for a company here in town, cool little startup. Started off as LCID until we finally strangled that branding and got it moved over to WindForce Technologies. And we built case management software for large cases. 9/11 hit, and that company wasn't able to get more funding. But so many moons ago, I was right in the legal tech instead of just serving law firms through Infusionsoft. So it's happy. I'm also helping out Mary with Tracklight. Infusionsoft was a customer of hers, and really leveraged that tool to help us grow. So, but welcome. Thank you for welcoming me. It's nice. I love this place.
Thanks.
Totally techy. Love it.
My name is Tyler Helmy, co-founder of Local Lawyer Guide. We're a boutique agency for attorneys, focusing on lead generation, conversion, intake, and case management systems.
Great. Well, we had to build this building because Infusionsoft kept on taking all my programming, so I had to become geek. So now I haven't been here. Who knows if I'm going to let him out? So it's great. You know, and if you look at it, I've been doing technology for 24 years. So, you know, I was so lucky when I started in the industry to get hired by this company called Knight Rider, which is a very large legal copy company back, if you remember, a long time ago. And we were doing this little case called Exxon Valdez. And so the technology was pretty cool because every Thursday we'd get boxes coming in from Alaska and we'd have to image it and get it back on the plane by Sunday. And so you really got to understand technology in the legal industry. But think about technology back in 1992. You had, you know, I was talking with Mark, I think, you know, it was DOS computers and WordPerfect and
That blue screen, WordPerfect.
Right. Yeah. The first thing I had to do is say, okay, this is a mouse, and we call it, you know. So it was really, really tough back then, and we were selling databases and document imaging and coding and trial presentation in '92. And so here, fast forward 24 years, and you look at where technology, how it exists in the firms today, it's mind-boggling. Not only what's being done, but the volumes. You know, so my last company, Lex Eludio, we landed this also fun little case called Enron. So Enron was out of Houston, Texas, and my company here in Phoenix won a lot of the work, and we were the court-appointed firm. And we were hosting online 200 million documents. You know, so if you think of 2002, 2003, 200 million documents online, how many firms do you think were even online in 2002, 2003? It was, and they were using summation and concordance. Those programs were really not built for that. You know, so now if you look at the cases, 200 million is not a lot of documents anymore, and you know, the old way of doing things on just the review and Ediscovery with analytics has drastically changed. So one of the things I found this, and by no means, we have 3 lawyers here. I have a paralegal degree in my MBA, but I've also stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so that works out okay. You know, Josh, you know, you're not a lawyer either, so we're outnumbered 3-2, so we're going to have to hold our own. But one of the things that I saw on this ABA, you know, client-lawyer relationship rule, and in the comments of number 8, you know, it says, to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology, engage in continuing study and education, and comply with all continuing legal education requirements to which the lawyer is subject to. So it's kind of interesting, you know, one of the things we combine technology and ethics here, that we have such a role as a lawyer, I guess, that, so maybe the panel would like to talk about now, you know, here we have one of the rules that says you have to stay up on technology, and my guess is it would be not only how technology can benefit the firm, but also the cases that you're trying. Almost all of them have to do with probably some technology in it. So Maria, what are you seeing out there at the firm?
Well, there is that issue of it's not even, forget that rule for a minute, it's our obligation to do what's in the best interest for our clients. That's our number one rule as attorneys. It's our fiduciary duty to our client to do what's in the client's best interest. And it's in the client's best interest, clearly, to do the work as efficiently as we can do it. So if there's a technology solution out there that allows us to process, for instance, an enormous amount of data, and to process that data in a fraction of the time than maybe our paralegal can do it, we've got an obligation to look at that. Now, we may pass some of the costs along to the client, but we've got an obligation to look at that and say, how can we do this most efficiently? What's in the client's best interest? So every step of the way, we are always asking ourselves what's in the client's best interest, and for my law firm, for our fundamentals, it's our number one fundamental is to look at that, and from an ethical perspective, it's very important. So.
And so, Josh, more on the general counsel side, what's your opinion?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of the work I do because of where Avo's position has to do with professional ethics and responsibility and lawyer obligations. And one of the things I've run across, it's a huge area here when it comes to the obligation of technological competence, has to do with communications technology. And so, particularly for lawyers who are dealing with consumers aren't using the phone as much as they used to. They're using Facebook, they're using Twitter, they're using Snapchat. And for lawyers who don't know how that stuff works, it can create tremendous problems. There was a case out of Virginia a couple of years ago, a horrible case where a woman was killed by a cement mixer. And the husband, the lawyer found out there was a photo of him on Facebook with two women holding a beer, wearing a T-shirt that said, "I love hot moms." And this was, some months after his wife had died. And he said, that's probably not the best thing for the defense to get its hands on, so why don't you just get rid of that? Not realizing that that's the functional equivalent of asking someone to go and bury a bunch of responsive documents in a landfill somewhere. And so, and then unbelievably, the plaintiff had connected with defense counsel on Facebook. They friended each other somehow. So they had this photo anyway. And so, adverse inference at trial, which still resulted in a $10 million verdict, but the attorney ended up getting suspended for 5 years and paying $750,000 in sanctions. And so it's just sort of, and there's a number of other cases that I've run across in the last couple of years of attorneys making similar errors, just because they didn't understand fundamentally that just because social media might be informal and seem flighty, it's still subject to all the same evidentiary rules as anything else.
And Mark, with Infusionsoft, I'm sure, to me, on the corporation side, you hire your outside counsel, you have different goals. What would be some of the goals that you would have for corporate counsel?
Well, I'd bring them in and interview them and make sure that they knew how to use tech. Because it's just more efficient and more cost-effective if you're working with somebody who is fluid in the modern technology landscape. All the stuff that law firms can do can be done manually. Hell, it was forever, right? But now the game has just changed in terms of the cost-benefit ratio. If the counsel that you're engaging was corporate counsel, besides the technology side and the product development, I was corporate counsel for 9 years until I finally found somebody I could hand that off to. And so it doesn't make sense to not have, not bleeding edge, but I'd go all the way to cutting edge, but I'm kind of a geek that way anyway.
So you would interview your...
Yeah, when we brought Fenwick and West in, more and more, all the top guys there, that did all of the IPOs that everybody is either excited or hates. And I expected them to really dazzle us, not just with their book of business and their results for their clients, but really with their ability to talk the talk and walk it too.
So Maria, would you say if the firm is not using technology, at least for discovery purposes, that they're unethical?
I think that line depends on a lot of factors. The word that we see often is reasonable. You have to take reasonable measures to be up to date on technology. You have to take reasonable measures to be secure. Like when I have a communication with my client, of course our communications are attorney-client privilege. They're privileged. Do I have to have encrypted software, encrypted emails? Does every email that goes out have to be encrypted? No. The State Bar has been very clear about that. It's not required. I have to take reasonable measures. So I think that what's reasonable changes as the technology landscape changes. So it may not be necessary today to have the cutting edge of software, at least not from an ethical perspective, but certainly if I were running a law firm that had no controls in place, no technology in place, that didn't utilize the most basic technology that people have been using for 15 years, I think you could cross the line into unethical at that point.
It's interesting when I started doing technology and being a computer geek and going to these firms and trying to get them to do document imaging. The lawyers back in '92 would look at me and, we would sell this whole value proposition of, look, you can take this, instead of the 5 or 6 copies that you're doing, you're going to image it and you build a database and you can sort immediately and you have all this work product, searchable, etc. And, there was at first a lot of pushback saying, well, I'm billable hours.
Bill on an hourly
You know,
basis. We
you know,
pass the copy cost along to our client.
Right,
That used to
right.
be the old attitude.
And that was a little painful to overcome. And so now, if you look at technology, 24 years later, the big thing is technology-assisted review and using analytics and Ediscovery, et cetera. And I'm hearing that same argument 24 years later is, well, we have a big review shop. We just helped a service provider work with a big case, and they 5 million documents, so good size. They only had to review about 5,000 documents because they're using technology-assisted review and analytics to call down and basically code the documents. And so for a customer, for the corporate customer, you should be going, yay, because look how much money was actually saved by doing that versus the billable hours that the law firm has.
Well, they're insisting on it. I mean, it's coming from our clients and our customers that are saying, if we're going to choose you as a law firm, you need to be doing it in the most technologically advanced, efficient way.
Yeah. So, today I kind of put together technology, and if you look at the group here, how many are in a firm smaller than 20 lawyers? Okay, and so how many are bigger than 100 lawyers? Okay, one. So if you look, I'm talking Ediscovery and 5 million documents and all this big thing, but technology, represents to me is totally different than your definition of technology. So your definition of technology might be, wow, I now have a voice over IP phone system, and my copier now scans and automatically gives me my files. So the definition of technology in the firm, at what point in time, I think that obviously the cases that you try and the types of cases and the size of the firm really makes a big difference. So why don't, Josh, what are some of the technologies that you've experienced in the firm, and what would be some of the goals that you would be looking at trying to implement?
Well, I mean, I've been working inside technology companies for most of my career. And certainly I would echo the comments earlier that I want my outside counsel to use technology. I don't necessarily need them to be on the bleeding edge, but I want them to be at a reasonable point. Because, I mean, we've been talking a lot about Ediscovery. I mean, let's face it, Ediscovery is a complete waste. From a client's perspective, it's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. I want it to cost as little as possible because it's completely unproductive activity. And so the more you can cut cost out of that, clients across the board are going to be saying, yes, machine learning, anything we can do, let's cut. I mean, I've engaged in e-discovery processes that cost tens of millions of dollars. And and I know that those boxes and boxes and boxes of documents were not used by anybody. It's just part of a compliance exercise. And so the more you can cut that down to a point where you're not having to deal with all of that wasted effort and money, that's a great use of technology. And that runs across the board even down to much smaller matters and smaller firms when it comes to the kinds of communication technologies you're using, whether you're choosing to do your practice management, your matter management, your client files in the cloud versus a physical office. These are all things, though, that, again, you need to evaluate in each case and not just sort of stick with the way you've been doing it when 20 years later there's all sorts of ways of doing it that are not only far more secure, but are also costing your clients a lot less.
So Josh is lucky that I had knee surgery, so I can't get up and fight him. But he just said Ediscovery was a waste, and all of a sudden my heart. I'm an Ediscovery software company, but I do believe, in the premise that Ediscovery can be one of your biggest costs in doing discovery if it's not done correctly, especially if you're not using the right calling techniques, and how are you collecting, and are there analytics involved, et cetera, involved. But the alternative for these big cases, I've worked on a lot of them, is the old manual way, and I don't think we want to go back there. But so what about you, Maria? What would be some of the things that you do on the technology? What have you seen in your firm? What's your definition of technology?
Well, what's my definition of technology? So I can't really point to one. Not one thing comes to mind. Well, I take that back. Things that make my life easier, I think that what we'd like to see, I would like to see more of would be technology in the billing and the timekeeping side. How many lawyers in the room like keeping timesheets, right? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and it's not good for the client. And obviously one way to do that, and we were talking to these ladies about their product, one way to do that is to look more at flat fee rates and alternative fee arrangements. But if you're in hourly billing situation, you want to be accurate. You don't want to lose time, and you don't want to not know how much time you spent on something. Your client's going to insist that it's accurate. It needs to be accurate, right? And how much time do we spend during the day accounting for our time? It's ridiculous. So for me, that's a place where technology really can make giant leaps. I just don't know anybody who's really happy with their billing and timekeeping system. So all the geeks in the room, create something for us. We're waiting for it. So that's one thing that comes to mind for me, technology-wise, that we use every day. We have billing software, we have timekeeping software, and in my opinion, it's archaic. It's just, and every one that we've looked at, I think, is archaic. So I'd love to see some strides in that area.
Are you doing, one of the things I have is depositions and trial presentation software.
Sure.
We have Mike Hahn in the group, who's an expert on deposition and trial presentation software. So have you used that type of technology?
Sure, we use Sanction.
Okay.
At the firm,
Little plug
absolutely.
for Mike.
Yeah.
By the way, you may not know it, but Phoenix is a hotbed of technology. And if you look, there's so many litigation technology companies here in Phoenix, Arizona, because of the Charlie Keating case. And that's where iPro started 27 years ago, is we started doing imaging for the Charlie Keating case. But Sanction, Mike founded Sanction here in Phoenix, right? And competitor in Data, and another company in Vision. So we have a long history of technology in Phoenix. So, so on the depositions, did you do like video synchronization and building Q&A pairs and stuff like that for trial? Or?
It depends on the client's needs.
Okay.
So I would say in the vast majority of my cases, it's not worth it. So we take video depositions only in cases where there's a specific reason. Again, my goal is always to do what's in the best interest of the client. And yeah, it's kind of fun to harass the other side. You know, the witness is going to be a little bit more uncomfortable when they've got a video camera in their face, and that's kind of fun. But that's not necessarily what's best for the client. What's best for the client is to determine, is this witness going to show up differently on the video than they're going to show up in the transcript? And if we have a reason to believe that that's going to make a difference, then we'll videotape it, and then we'll use that, and then it'll be all synced up with the transcript, and it'll be used for trial. Also, is the witness not going to be available for trial, right? So either am I going to want to impeach this witness in a way where I can show them squirming and I can show the way they were on the video, or do I have a reasonable belief that they're not going to be available for trial? If it's not one of those two instances, I'm typically not videotaping my depositions. I'm just doing, good old-fashioned, transcripts with who I think is the best court reporter in the world. And so, we use that. But then when we get to trial, we certainly need trial presentation software in almost every case. Especially, I do a lot of intellectual property. I do almost all intellectual property, and that's all in federal court. And so you've got the electronic courtroom, and you can plug right into the electronic courtroom, and you want to be able to utilize that equipment that's there.
Well, and if you look at the court systems, really help on the use of technology at trial, just for the fact that now almost all of the courthouses are pre-wired. When I was doing trials, we would carry in these big, this is a nice monitor. We'd bring in these big monitors and tape everything down, and now you can bring your laptop in.
Now you just plug in. Now there's a little cord right there, and you plug your laptop in.
Sure. So, Mark, what about technology for you? To me, I look on the corporate side, especially like Infusionsoft. You have all kinds of other issues like, up here we have legal hold and, data collections, and now all of a sudden, BYOD, bring your own devices there, and how are you managing all that equipment and stuff like that. So when you do have an action, what would be some of the technology things that you'd want to talk about?
Well, I wish that I could wave a magic wand, and so speaking of like all the geeks out here that want a good idea, figure out a way to snapshot for a litigation hold a whole enterprise and be able to just push that up to some repository in the cloud, because it's a pain in the butt to just and Infusionsoft hosts all of our customers' data, which are small businesses, and so many times they're in dispute or partnership or in some compliance issue or something, and we have to hold the data for the customers, not just in addition to getting a lit hold for Infusionsoft and our own internal systems and IT. So I wish there was some way to just snapshot all that and push it up to some place that I could just sit on and know I didn't have to babysit it.
Well, the problem on that is it's just not your enterprise anymore. It's your phones. It's your website. It's your text messaging, emails. I mean,
right. Try to tell a millennial that you have to use the corporate BlackBerry.
Right.
That's not going to work. I mean, they're all they'll set up universal hotspots for them to be able to bring their own iPad or their tablet. So it's tough. But on the other hand, like, we would embrace that. We would say, great, here's the rules. We followed what I call the principle of sufficiency. You need enough process, kind of Goldilocks, not too much, but something, right? So here are the rules. Bring it, and we'll put the security key and encryption in for the company and set you up on the network properly so we can monitor it and track it and archive and so I mean there's ways to do it even though it's a pain.
So right now the industry is kind of my world on the Ediscovery side and on the software side. There's been a revolution over the last 5 years on the corporations to go and say, we've been paying all this money for discovery forever, and we're now controlling it. So, we're seeing more and more corporations putting software behind their firewall. We're seeing more and more doing their own self-collections, calling down data, even, hosting the data and having the service bureaus and the law firms come in, and access the data for security reasons, keeping it behind the firewall. So, so what we're on the cloud stuff. What do you think of like the bringing the software in versus Outlook 365 and stuff like that as a general counsel?
Ask me. I'm not sure if I got it.
Okay, so the corporations are trying to bring all this in-house, but then at the same time, on the processing software and e-discovery and collections and legal hold, but now you also have a lot of companies going and changing their infrastructure, IT infrastructure for like Outlook 365 and
right.
now
Google Docs
and stuff like that. So how would you manage that and what security risk and is Outlook 365 something that you would do and how would you handle that on the law firm side? I mean, dealing with the law firm side.
So I'm typically not a Microsoft fan. So there's just security problems that I've had to solve before. They have a ton of great products. I just don't prefer them, right? And so I haven't had to solve it on that side just because I made choices to steer away from the Microsoft product lines. But for example, Infusionsoft's PCI compliant. Last year we processed over $5.5 billion of e-commerce on behalf of our customer base. And like you put a Microsoft product in your production environment, and that about 7x is your audit cost and time, just because of the complexity and the security risk that imposes on. So that just gives you a little taste of some of the choices that we've made over the years to move away from that. But to get back to your main question, there's all kinds of tools that can track the types of connections that are going across your firewall up into a cloud repository. And if you really have to be secure on it, then do it intentionally. Like go get a vRooms account and or some type of a eVault where you have all kinds of audit tracking in terms of access and what types of for duration documents are accessed and looked at and by who and more logging than any attorney would ever be willing to dig through.
Sure. Yeah, and definitely on the technology side, I've seen, like I said, it's full circle where corporations are now saying, I'm going to control costs. How much can I do myself? I'm going to call down all this data way before I ever let it get to the law firm. So it used to be, the corporations would just handle over that snapshot that you talk about. Here's everything, law firm, you deal with it. And then all of a sudden they got sticker shock and they saw all these costs involved.
So what we would do is, on the reasonableness standard, we'd use big machine learning and just really have a probability score on what is likely to be important or not. And that, in two separate cases where we have approached it that way to cull down our data set into a reasonable and probable, document group, that was allowed just for efficiency purposes.
So Josh, you kind of see it in a different, Ty, you see it in a kind of a different area, more, I'd like to hear what technologies are you seeing in the firms, and also what barriers to technologies are you seeing in the firms?
Well, we don't see much technology in the firms, but no, it's true. It's a little different for us with our clients. We're coming in with two goals, which are closely related, which is one, improve operational efficiencies as well as improve transparency, whether it's internal or external, meaning whether it's within your organization or whether it's client-facing transparency. So on the operational efficiency side, we work with a lot of clients, small, medium, even some larger firms that wouldn't like to admit it, where they're still pen and paper. They're still pen and paper on intake forms, and there's still hearsay with the paralegal speaking with the attorney about what happened in their most recent meeting, as opposed to immediately documenting those conversations. So we put a lot of systems in place for attorneys to become connected with the rest of their staff. So when a staff comes in and they have a paralegal, the associates, partners, and owners all plugging into one system where all communications, legal forms, or case activity is being recorded in a real-time basis, that's a drastically different environment than pen and paper, right? So that's the operational efficiency side of things. The transparency obviously comes with that, where the owner of a firm or the partners of a firm are able to take a vacation, finally, and be able to still have that visibility into how their firm is operating, who's touching what, who's not touching what, and maybe where some potential workflow issues do exist. And then to kind of wrap that up on the transparency side as it relates to clients, I think someone said it best, which is kind of, how does it relate to you? That was your question, right? And with a lot of consumers, right, let's not forget about those people. Technology has facilitated communication and responsiveness. And if you don't respond to somebody 10 years ago, within maybe a couple weeks, okay, all right. Nowadays, if you don't respond to somebody within how long before they're frustrated, before they're feeling like you didn't do your job? And how has that changed so drastically over such a short period of time? Because of technology. And so, Mary, as you mentioned, having that diligence or that obligation to respond to your clients almost in a systematic manner is where some of our other technology can come in and automate those responses, so that clients may not even realize it, but it's an automated response that's satisfying their need to just be spoken or responded or kept up to date. So those are the two goals that we really have when we go in and work with our clients.
So you mentioned communication and automation, and obviously in the firm you have the whole technology that you can use for discovery, but you also have just general office practices, right? So I know in my own company we try to do WebExes instead of traveling all over the country, and more people working from home, which adds all kinds of other technology, security issues, etc. So, on that side of things, we could easily get bogged down on the discovery. But, Maria, do you guys like using e-file and stuff like that to try to improve your efficiencies? And what would be some of the things that you could recommend to the group on efficiencies within the firm?
So everything's e-filed now. And And again, the courts have driven that. We talked about that earlier. As the courts, become more technologically advanced, advanced in courts is not a good. As the courts become a little further along technology-wise and keep up with us, that really helps. But some of the technologies that make us the most efficient, there's so many out there. There's so many options out there now. I can't think of, there's so much technology in my life that it's sort of an overwhelming question, what makes me most efficient? And I think I take it for granted because it's just around me every day. So I can't put my finger on one thing.
So you gave me a great word, option. So Josh, here what she said was option, and so if you look just in my software space, there's probably 60 competitors that I have, and you could go across the board from phone systems to video conferencing. I mean, options. So on the, if you were on a technology committee in a firm, what would be some of the things that you'd want to vet, or how would you vet the different technologies, and maybe is it different for a small versus a large firm?
Well, yeah, it's definitely custom for what you're doing, and you have to be rational about it. This is where I think it's important for firms to not necessarily be on the bleeding edge. They have to look at what kind of customers are you facing, and your needs are going to be different if you're dealing with consumers, and I think your need to be more on the bleeding edge in terms of communication is keener with consumers than it might be with corporate clients. But you also have to be focused on the right issues, which I think is hard for us sometimes as lawyers. We get sort of balled up in these things that really aren't as important, but that we end up spending a lot of our time on. Like when you think about cloud-based solutions, I think lawyers will a lot of times worry about all these edge cases and all of these theoretical risks, which are all apply to various cloud-based solutions, but then they're ignoring the opportunity cost and the risks that are on the other side. And there's a lot of risks inherent in keeping physical files in your office. There's the risk of fire, theft, disgruntled employees, and yeah, there are some theoretical risks with putting things in the cloud. But then you can really mitigate virtually all of those risks by doing the most minimal amounts of due diligence. Just reading up on the documentation and doing business with people who have some level of reputation. I mean, that solves like 90% of your problems right there. And so it's really just sort of approaching it in this objective, open-minded fashion when you're looking at these technology options.
Right, so it's kind of interesting. Practicing law, there's a whole law piece, but then think about the evidence management that you just said. One, we talked about earlier, evidence is everywhere, and so you have the whole legal hold and collection issue. But then you mentioned where do you store it and spoliation issues, etc. So what would be some great recommendations, on the evidence side? I mean, one of the things that I would highly recommend is, go back to your firm and find out how much evidence is in your paralegal drawer and say, that's probably not a good idea. So Maria, do you have special ways that you handle evidence in your firm, and do you have FTP sites, or what's the chain of custody and stuff like that you're doing with that?
We have two things that we do. One is we have a server that keeps sort of PDF versions of evidence. So if we've got the PDF version, the Bates labeled version, it sits on a server there, but that's not real searchable. And so so if we've got sort of the native files and we've got the evidence that's come in that has not yet been Bates labeled, or it's still in native format, or it still needs to be searched, it needs to be searchable, then we use Eclipse, we use an iPro product. So that's how we deal with evidence. But iPro is not the solution for everything for us yet. I'm sure it will be. But because we also still have the PDF on the server, and that's a little bit of a transition for us right now.
And so Ty, you're a vendor, and we talked earlier about vetting software or all these other technologies, but there's also the whole service component. So what recommendations could you give these guys on helping to pick a vendor, maybe to help implement or guide you on the technology?
Well, there's quite a number, as mentioned. I think one of the things is certainly checking the reputation, right? That comes first and foremost. But you want to find a company, given the very limited time that, if you're an attorney in this room, you have, to really find a company that's going to be hands-on, a company that you can call and is going to be dedicated to helping you figure the solution out. whether they currently have that available or whether they need to do that for you. So there's a lot of tech companies out there that will just kind of provide you a foundation service, and it's your job to learn that service, it's your job to make that service work. And then there's some companies a little bit better suited to be working with where they're really invested in kind of taking it to the next level. So I think trust is hard to come by because there's just so many companies out there and there's such a high demand for it that these companies keep popping up left and right. So just really working and making sure that you have some type of dedicated representative that's going to be there every step of the way with you, because it takes time to become comfortable with technology and really make that change.
So if there's one trick that you have, a technology trick that you have that you can go and say, and forget about, I'm going to ask all the panel, but forget about just Ediscovery or law firms. What technology tip is there? Is there a template or a piece of software that you can't live without that just changes your life?
For both our organization as well as what we our goal is to pitch this as well to everyone we work with is you need to have some type of universal system that everybody is plugged into. I think that's for me the most important element for our organization and really the clients that we work with, because without that you're really trying to piecemeal a lot of things together, and obviously within law there's quite a lot of sophistication behind what's going on. There's a lot of moving parts. And quite frankly, depending on your type of firm, there's a lot of people working on a specific project. So I'd say having some type of universal system that everybody is plugged into with a great amount of internal transparency is by far what's most important to us.
So Mark, what's the one technology you can't live without?
That's going to be hard to answer.
I
don't know if I could live without technology.
How about this? How about a smartphone?
Yeah.
How did people live before this thing?
It's amazing. See, for me, it's Skype. I'm on Skype 24 hours a day, and the money that we save with Skype, and the meetings that we have, and I can share my desktop.
Wait a minute, that's not a Microsoft product. Did you hear what he said, Mark?
Yeah, no, Microsoft. Skype is Microsoft. So,
only by acquisition.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at, we have people all over the country, and even our demos that we do is now all virtual, and so whether it's WebEx or Skype, not being able to, and it's probably the biggest change for us on efficiency and cost. It's so easy even to have remote people where they used to be an island. Now, because of Skype, sharing desktops and video. All of our computers, I use my video all the time. My employees aren't happy about it because they can see this great face. But what about you?
Kim, I don't know if I could live without it, but I got a recommendation for a hot type of app that really is helping in terms of communication flow in my teams that I had at Fusionsoft and just really pushing the productivity buttons. And that's to get into a Slack group or a River group or a Honey group.
So explain to these guys, a Honey group could be different meaning for me for you. Happy with that. So what is a River and a Honey group?
So go and download River or Slack, RYVER, or Honey. They're on the App Store or on Google Play, and it's really just it's a glorified chat client, okay? But it's way more than that. You can append documents and images and all kinds of things, and you can really effectively set up groups and subgroups for quick projects, for big expansive projects, and it really just facilitates the flow of communication. It's like you're hanging out. It's like kind of a Google Hangout, but more effective than the Google Hangout.
See, I just learned about Periscope, and Twitter has their own, but being able to have your own broadcast. So, in marketing, I'm always, looking for a new way to market, and I'm like, wow, I can have my phone and just start having my video blog basically in real time, do a presentation anytime I want. So we should have had this be on Periscope. Or,
So before I get to my favorite technology, I'll say something about what you said about Skype. So I took a deposition about, 4 or 5 months ago of somebody in Australia on Skype, and about a half a year before that, I took a deposition of somebody in Latvia on Skype. And so the court reporter was in New York, the deponent was in Latvia, and I was in Phoenix, and we took the deposition that way. So, not the court reporter, the translator. The court reporter was with me. So, but I think that probably my number one piece of technology that I obviously I could live without, I wouldn't want to live without, would be a document management software called FileSite. It's an iManage software, and it has allowed me to go paperless. So I no longer have physical files. I have a FileSite on my computer where in my Outlook box, I have a drop-down that looks just like my files: pleadings, communications, pleadings, letters, drafts, settlement, trial docs, and it's right there in a folders similar to folders that I might have seen in a physical file. And once that system got implemented in my office, and once I got comfortable with that system, I stopped opening any physical files. I always open only electronic files, and FileSite allows me to do that because it makes the files on my desk. And I love that.
You're supposed to say Eclipse. Josh, how about you?
I'll say, first of all, before I get, when it comes to Skype, Skype does have wonderful functionality, but it's a pet peeve of mine that when people use Skype for communications that would just as easily be done on a phone, I hate that, because Skype is way kludgier than using a phone. It's great for stuff where you need distributed people and video, but if you don't need that, just pick up the damn phone. Don't make me deal with Skype videos. The thing that's really changed for me is Evernote. I don't know how Evernote. I don't think I can get by with that.
I love that too.
Yeah, Evernote it's a fantastic product. It syncs across all your devices, and it's like become an external brain for me. I probably have a couple thousand notes in Evernote, and I've got it categorized into probably 45 different notebooks, and their search function is just so powerful. You can drop anything in there. And so I've got everything from like my kids' mileage plan numbers to, anything that I might remotely need at any time, I just drop in there, knowing that I can pull it back at any time. And then I also have a lot of my workflow stuff in there for legal research and things that I've run across in my job as well is also organized in a notebook. So,
has good team capabilities too to distribute out some notes across the team.
Yeah, I haven't used that yet, but that's obviously something they've invested a lot of time in.
Yeah, we used that heavily in Fiduciary. It was really effective.
See, if my wife were here right now, she'd be like, "Go get that, Kim," because she's my Evernote. It's birthday is it today? So, well, we're down to 3-4 minutes. I do have this chart here real fast, but it's small law firms survey. And if you look at one of the number one things is revamping their website. And we could talk about social media and the ethical challenges of social media, and can you use it for advertising or just even the case information. So social media could be a whole hour topic, but so 49% for websites, 25% moving everything to the cloud. And my prediction 5 years from now, your whole IT won't exist. It'll be up there. It's coming fast. So 47% paperless, and you mentioned paperless, and being an old imaging guy, I thought it would be here way long ago, but we still have paper. Why, I have no idea. And and 25% law management, law practice management. So it's interesting. How many of you guys using like CaseMap? You're using CaseMap for a law firm? That's a very good software program that kind of manages your evidence and your people and your issues. It's very inexpensive and doesn't take that long to learn. So a couple minutes, questions for the panel? Yes?
I have a quick question, and it has to do with Microsoft. I hear you, Mark. However, there's been some activity at Microsoft, and they're rolling out, for the first time, it's kind of interesting, something called Matter Center. But it's really the first kind of, I'll call it industry solution that Microsoft has put out. And they've done something interesting with it. And that is they put it out on GitHub, which means it's open source. And so I think it's extremely interesting that that's happening during these times. And I want to know if any of you have heard of Matter Center or have any familiarity with it.
Well,
Microsoft
and I, we're getting ready to do battle. They're trying to come in and really get into the legal hold, review, etc. So, they've made some acquisitions in this space, and especially since most of your data is in Microsoft, they're really going to try to solve the corporation legal.
Well, Marcia said something interesting, and that is, having a little knowledge of technology in the legal space is that, lawyers you're probably two real important apps, Microsoft Word and Outlook, right? I mean, what do you think with 90% of lawyers are well, what Microsoft is doing now, so you guys know, is they're making it so a lawyer only has to have open Microsoft Word or Outlook, and they have access, like Marcia, you described your file scenario.
Yeah.
That's Matter Center.
Yeah, Microsoft is really getting into the review and discovery space big time. So, yes?
My question revolves more around the security of using certain apps and software. Evernote obviously was mentioned, and we've been looking into different apps like that, and where where your line is drawn in the security of using a third party like that to store information or to
I thought it's Josh, right? I thought Josh answered it best when he said you really know your provider. Do your research on your provider. Make sure that they have a good reputation in the industry. Because if they have a good reputation in the industry, well, let me say it this way: if they didn't have security protocols in place, they wouldn't have a good reputation in the industry. It's just so critical.
Okay.
But, and I guess it really depends upon is it on your laptop, and so then do you have encryption on your laptop, or is this a cloud-based system? I know we do penetration tests on our software all the time, and we hire companies to come in and try to break it, etc. So it just really depends upon, is it enterprise-wide, is it local, and there's right now how many of your phones are unlocked, so I mean there's all kinds of ways to get in. So security is a big thing.
You can ask for certificates of compliance if they're most enterprise level software companies are required to do HIPAA, PCI, SAS 70, and you can ask them for their certificate of compliance from their audit firm. And by the way, also, if it's a reputable cloud provider, and if they're not around very long with the speed of social media, right? The security is in a whole nother league, and the performance and the maintenance is from an in-house IT staff, even a well-funded, well-staffed one. I had engineers that are world-class in terms of security and defeating those penetration tests that we would get at random with our audit firms that we hired all over the world. And small businesses and even medium-sized businesses, even with a good IT budget, it's just completely in a different league in terms of a superior security product to put your data out into a cloud provider that's reputable.
Well, and you said HIPAA, where normally that door going into our room is all shut down, and you can't get in without a little key fob, and we have to do background checks now of every employee because we're HIPAA. There's cameras everywhere, so the bigger companies, the bigger you are, obviously, the more precautions you have to take. But we're going to be around drinking wine and eating all that great food.
We're not done yet.
Oh, right, I know, but I'm saying for the panel, we're
Okay.
so.
And a few people on the panel still have to sign their media releases. So.
And I have extras right
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. It's very.
Out of your way, don't you?
here. Yeah.
No, you can stay up here. You can have a